Hello there. Hello. Can everyone hear me? Let me know when you can hear me. Welcome to the show. Welcome to well, outside in York today it is doing all of the weathers. Yesterday we had a ping pong ball sized hail. Now we just had a rumble of thunder. I should have opened the window so you can get like the rain and thunder action. But anyway, I'm not going to do it because it makes my hair stand on end. It's very humid here. Yeah, hello. I need to get better at doing the not pausing because I need to make a smoother intro for the audio only people. Hello, audio only people. Hello. Oh, right. I had coffee earlier, and I've been drinking a lot of decaf recently because otherwise I'd have heart problems. And I had two flat whites with full fat caffeine, and I am shaking. Normally, caffeine didn't used to affect me, which probably is more of a damning indictment on how much of it I had. Anyway, enough of that waffling. There is so much to talk about today. I am barely on top of how much news there is. There is so much news. Oh my goodness. So let's crack on with the news to see what's going on. Some of it is. Anyway, right. Let's just talk about it. So. First, before we do that, though, obviously, we've got to look at our COVID ridership. Oh, and also, I need to get my Wacom out so I can scribble on things. This is obviously going to be whacked by some of the big news which we'll get to. Annoyingly, I think ridership will take a bit of a... It's going to muck up the ridership numbers quite substantial, which will be annoying. There we go. There's some more news, but I didn't want to do that. I wanted to press this button here. So you can see that this weird... I don't know what this spike is. Feel free to suggest what this spike is. I don't know what it is. This drop spike. I don't know what it is, but I'd be interested to know. I suppose likewise this one. Are these eccentricities in the data? I don't really know. That's for road. So that's for road. There you can see road generally continuing to rise quite steadily. If I did a weekly rolling average, it would be a pretty flat upwards rise. Cycling, as ever, bouncing all over the place. Bus services generally kind of recovering. They're sat at around 60% usage at the moment, 60% of pre-COVID times. Rail is hovering around just under the 40% mark. So you can see rail there. Obviously, the provisional numbers only are in, and they're usually a bit rubbish. Generally, the real numbers are a bit higher. However, because of all this IET stuff, I'm kind of expecting this to drop a bit. So, which is at the exact time the industry needs to not be losing patrons. We've managed to shoot ourselves in the foot. I mean, we'll talk about that when we get to the news, right? But anyway, there's the numbers. I'll continue to put these up every week because it's interesting to sort of follow the trace. We won't maybe say much more than that about the COVID numbers. Right, next, the news. So, well, there's so much to talk about. I've actually chopped something. Well, there's some things I've chopped, which we'll maybe talk about next week, if depending on what news items come up, because there's so much to get through. In any case, and I also want to talk about buses later. Believe it or not, that is what the episode says. So, first piece. Obviously, now that the election has happened, the government are rolling back their promises about roads, but also they're wrapping into that promises about rail projects as well, and we're going to touch on what that means shortly. I really should get rid of ads off here. Go away, that ad. Anyway, serves me right for screenshotting things, but I'd recommend, if you want to have a bit of insight on this, I'd recommend Carlton Reid's piece in Forbes. Actually, quick read. You just need to switch your ad blocker off, and he quotes me at the bottom of it, which is good because it provides some kind of context in a lot of the doomsaying and sort of discussions about the future of projects going on. Next news item. So that's a project call there going on. Discussion about reducing the amount of projects within RIS 2 that are going to be built. Blah blah blah. Next, happy news! Hooray! Mayor James Palmer has not only been voted out, but has decided to quit politics. Probably because he had a nice, rosy lobbying job lined up for himself afterwards. Anyway, generally with these sorts of people, the political career is merely just a thing that they can then put on their CV to get the really big number jobs working for, a consultancy or whatever. Palmer's gone. Nasty piece of work. He's gone. And with him goes Cam. So that's the Cambridgeshire Autonomous Metro, which isn't just in Cambridgeshire. It wasn't autonomous and isn't a metro. It's gone. It's been binned. It doesn't exist anymore. Now, people are kind of fairly rightly saying, well, is that really a good thing to get rid of a mass transit project? Isn't the whole problem in Britain that we do and don't do, that we say we're going to do something, then we don't do it? Well, yes and no. The issue is that if you have a vanity, and I don't use the word vanity project lightly, but this literally was a project created to make this man with this picture that he puts everywhere. All of his press releases come out with this JPEG, a high-resolution JPEG of him doing this face. Good riddance to it. If you create a project for the sake of being a project that makes you look good, rather than actually being based on the needs of an area, then it is ripe for going and being binned. If you create a project based on a broad coalition of needs, based on political buy-in from all parties, you're actually doing something that's not for your own vanity, but for the benefit of the people that you represent, then the project will stick around. So that's my response to people worrying. And more importantly, it means that Nick Johnson, who's taken over from James Palmer, is more interested in bus franchising, in improving parking arrangements, restrict more parking restrictions, and generally doing a better job with what there is in the short to medium term. And I think that's the right thing. But hopefully, Nick Johnson will then look at mass transit again in the kind of the medium to longer term, because Cambridge does need more, but Nick Johnson has talked about buses, has talked about making better use of existing rail connections, stuff that kind of making better use of what's there in the short to medium term is the right thing to do. So good riddance to Cam. It's gone. What's next? The DFT are up to shenanigans again. So, as ever, DFT with their finger on the pulse in no way whatsoever. And to be fair, this is Treasury, not the DFT. I'm being mean about the DFT. The DFT are merely doing what Treasury is telling them to do. Treasury, abolish the Treasury, are saying that they want to use flexible rail season tickets to limit the way people don't travel, limit people's flexibility and force them to travel to work more often. What a fantastic way to make people not travel by rail. What an unbelievably stupid policy idea. The railway is there to serve. It is there to provide what people need. It is not on us to limit and alter the way people move around and travel. We need to respond to how people travel. We need by providing a consistent, frequent, and accessible service. This is just bonkers, absolutely bonkers. Yes, this is just, oh my goodness. DFT are up to shenanigans again. Oh, what's really good is when I do spelling right. Wait, watch this. Wait for it. There we are. That's better, isn't it? Inclusive language baffles easily offended. Yeah, this has just happened just now, like today, where people are becoming angry because someone called out LNER and just said, look, I've just had an announcement that said, ladies and gentlemen, LNER's policy is to say, welcome to the train, everyone, not specify. That way, language is inclusive. But the people who claim others are easily offended, but actually the ones who are easily offended themselves don't like this. I'd suggest everyone everyone who's angry about this goes and looks up the meaning of the word inclusive. Congratulations to LNER in politely and sensibly responding. Their social media team are now enduring hell, as are everyone, and it's a horrible mess. But for goodness sake, non-binary identities are valid, folks. Ladies and gentlemen doesn't cover everyone. So use different language, which does include everyone. Easy, very easy. As LNER accepted, to their great credit, the team are great at LNER. They fix things as best they can. Anyway, what else? Okay, so we'll get onto the two big news items. Lawrence did call LNER out rightly, and LNER responded really well. Credit to Lawrence. Unfortunately, I believe Lawrence Fox has now found Lawrence's tweet and is now dunking on it. So, good God, apologies for your mentions, Lawrence. The other evil Lawrence is... Anyway, yes. So, oh my goodness. What am I doing? I'm going here to the big news, or some of the big news. There's so much news. This news. Graham Harrith, exactly, everyone. Well, I don't need to say people, just need to say everyone. Just need to say welcome on board, everyone, or welcome on board. You don't even need to specify. Just say welcome on board, which is what LNER said. It's kind of sorted. Right, here's a picture of an Intercity Express train. This kind of looks like it's in Casado, actually, or is it in Italy? I'm going to guess Casado because there's Japanese over here in the back corner. Is that yeah, there? Anyway, this is an Intercity Express train. These are the kind of these through what can only be described. Right. Firstly, let's frame this properly. These are great trains, right? They have some issues. Some of their internal specs are a bit naff. The lighting, the seats are things that not everyone likes. But these are great trains. They are good trains, folks. They are good trains. However, also simultaneously true is that these are a public procurement catastrophe because they cost way more than they should have, were part of an unbelievably complicated PFI PPP mess enacted by New Labour and then continued by the coalition government. Just a shambles. Eyes pass him. I'd recommend referring back to countless private eye stories about this. It's just a shambles. However, that doesn't make it a bad train. But there have been some issues identified. I'm going to do some funny to this picture so we can talk about where the issues have been. Here is me upping or downing the contrast so that we can see things going on. Down here is this thing, which is a bogie. Here is a bogie. Here you can see this is a thing. There's a thing attached to the bottom of the frame. Part of this is connecting. So here you can see a connection to the yaw damper. There's the yaw damper. This was an issue a few weeks ago, and it was identified as an issue. Now, a new issue has arisen, which is here, which is on the jacking point, which I think if I jump to the next picture, here is an IET song bits and pieces. You can just see the body frame here. It's formed of aluminium extruded panels, kind of welded together. Actually, you can sort of see the weld here. In fact, I think, I zoom in on this? You can see the part that we were talking about a minute ago. If I zoom in on this, yes, I have zoomed in on it. This is the jacking point. Anyone who's in here who wants to correct me is welcome to, but I believe this is the jacking point. And the issues have been spotted in, let me think, Ellis says there are 156 IET trains in the UK right now. I think quite a lot of them are current. What's happening is they're being inspected for cracks. Cracks were spotted. I was trying to find the picture, but I couldn't find it. Cracks have been spotted. Actually, it's not only in the IETs. Cracks have been spotted in the Class 385s, so they're based on a similar platform, but designed for kind of commuting rather than long distance, high speed stuff. They're the ScotRail kind of electric intercity fleet, and also I believe issues, but slightly different issues, have been spotted on the Javelins, which are the 395s, aren't they? So all of the IET related sort of what are they? A train platform trains. All of them have got some issue picked up in relation to welding. We're going to find out. Hopefully Hitachi will be comfortable enough to publish their findings so that we understand what the issue is. They've been as honest as they can sensibly be at this point. I think all credit to Hitachi. The Hitachi UK and Europe team don't want to stop their trains running. This is clearly not a situation they want. So they'll be undoubtedly doing everything in their power to understand the problem. I just willing them to be as open as possible. The big masters at Hitachi might not want that openness, but in Japan might not want that openness. I hope they are going to be open. That's all I'm going to say about that for now. The just kind of considerations for this are ongoing, but I've seen a lot of nonsense about. There's a lot of nonsense about these trains not being British trains. These trains are no more or less British than any modern train on the network right now. So ignore that. And also, I was going to put the picture in actually. There's the disc. I can't. Oh, maybe I can check the disc. There we are. Oh yeah, there's a nice picture. I can't put it into the. I can't be clever enough to put it into the. But there is a picture going around of the crack on that. I think it is the jacking point there that I've kind of specified. It takes time to individually assess these. The fixing. The welding of these requires the removal of the veritable cardiovascular system of electric loom, wiring within the train for them to allow to do the weld repair. However, they're not going to have to do this all at once. The plan currently is that they're getting to the point where they reckon that the normal service will be largely resumed kind of by the end of the week. I think that's the hope. I think the plan they've broadly got an agreed way forward to the OR. Here's hoping, and this next bit is speculation from me. Even if they were, then I think the idea is that they're just ensuring that this is not a safety critical failure that can result in a failure during running. Then what they can do is basically retire, kind of ground individual units and then fix each unit in turn whilst, with 1 or 2 units out of service getting the work done, is not catastrophic to operation. It tightens operation up, means a little bit less resilience, but it's not catastrophic. So I think that's what will happen. There'll just be a kind of a rolling program of corrective welding works, if indeed it needs it to happen at all. I could share the screen, Ella, but I have too many windows and there's too much chaos. And I don't want to accidentally show any usernames or anything, blah, blah, blah. Right, so, it's in the Discord. The picture can be in the Discord for anyone who wants to look at it on the Discord server, so head over there to have a look. What else I can say? The other point I was going to make is, and I totally forgot to bring this one up, but basically, there's an image, which, in fact, a news story about the fact that the Intercity 225, where can I get this picture up? Can I do it? I maybe can't. Let me go down here. Yes. No, there it is. This picture here, which I'm now going to cleverly drop into the slides as if by magic. Here we are, and expand this picture to here. Good golly, this is on the hoof, sugary. Right, there's an image. It's a very pixel rationed image. This is an image of an Intercity 225, which derailed near Sandy at 100 miles an hour after one of the wheels on the Mark IV coaches failed. It was in 1998. It was very soon after Esheda. Go and watch the Well, There's Your Problem podcast episode to find out about that. So everyone got very nervous, and the whole fleet was grounded for inspections. So this is not a new thing. A lot of people were getting high and mighty about HSTs. A reminder that the HSTs used to randomly open their doors into traffic, and more scarily, used to several times at speed. The couplers between the Mark III coaches just sheared entirely and split the train at speed. So this happens. Far better that Hitachi are picking up the problem before there are any dangerous occurrences. Much better that it happens now than later, but obviously it is a bit of a problem. It's not exact at a time when we need to be building confidence in the industry and getting people back on board. This is clearly not ideal. So, but it's been nice to see the railway has become a timetable planner's nightmare, but there are just a huge number of random bits of rolling stock floating around in different parts of the country, in order to kind of replace these trains, or kind of temporarily provide some seats for people to get on the railway. So actually, it's been a really good example of the railway family transcending commercial boundaries. I hope there won't be any kind of wranglings afterwards, but there's a lot of effort to just pull the rail industry at its finest, actually, which is pulling together in a crisis and solving some problems. So some seriously fantastic work happening with the train operating companies, with the train leasing. As far as from what I can see, lots of really positive stuff going on as people pull together to try and provide a solution in the temporary for passengers. Kind of making the passengers who are being disrupted their lives a little bit less horrible. So. Yay, Liam. So, right, let me continue to talk about the news. Next news item is the most important one I'm going to talk about. The most important one I'm going to talk about today. It's a biggie, which is that the government are pushing, and this hopefully is going to kind of appear a bit more in the next, hopefully the next week or so, as more people hopefully will talk about this, because this is big news to my mind. Major big news. Yes, Network Rail are being forced to make pretty massive cuts to their costs. And this extract here, this is an extract of, they're going to be calling it modernisation. So whoever in the Network Rail branding team came up with that name is someone who is not steeped in railway history, because anyone else will know that modernisation was the last time that word was used to refer to a major alteration of the way the railways operated, it was broadly a complete calamity. So they're calling it modernisation, which is obviously going to go well. Maybe it's someone who knows exactly what they're doing to call it that. Maybe someone cynical enough. This is why I push so hard against the idea of the railway being in decline, or that the kind of passenger numbers are in terminal decline. Even like. In mainland Europe, is anyone talking about railway cuts? In even the US, are they talking about infrastructure cuts, railway cuts? This at a time when we have a chronic skills shortage and a desperate need to increase the railway's capacity to get modal shift away from road and air, but particularly from road, we have government forcing Network Rail to make cuts off the back of a pandemic that was nothing to do with the railway. It was a global pandemic. It was a global crisis. It's not the railways. Like this, the debt that the railways built up is not a big deal. That's for government to worry about, not for the railway to worry about. And ultimately, that debt is irrelevant. It's just we've just dropped into meaningless. The money doesn't exist. It is meaningless. So the idea that the railway is in some debt that it needs to dig itself out of, what on earth does this mean? We cost too much. According to what and who? By what measure? And this, unfortunately, this whole narrative is going to be used. This whole thing, the idea, we're now in a situation where the rail industry is bankrupt. Again, by what measure? Why is the railway bankrupt? What? We're costing the government £32 million a day. That doesn't sound like that much, to be honest. But, like, yes, that's because everyone's been told to stay at home, so they can't travel by rail. This is then going to be used as a tool to reduce the amount that's invested in the railways. And this will also play into the hands of people who say that HS2 is taking all the money at the expense of the existing railway, because they will be right if this stuff goes forwards. It is the only thing that's a crisis for rail is that the railways have a crisis of leadership. That's the only crisis going on right now. A crisis of leadership. People with a backbone to push back against this nonsense from government. It is just... I'm sorry, this is an abhorrent situation. When staff at Network Rail are already massively overstretched, are already working themselves thin, we already have infrastructure that is, frankly, creaking and needs a hell of a lot more attention, at a time when we have infrastructure failures from a lack of climate resilience. You know, Network Rail are doing their best to keep on top of it, but the battle is a losing battle because of the double kind of battle of more trains needing to be run, plus more pressure from a changing climate. The idea that we need to be shrinking the railways it's just really, really, I mean, it's difficult to put into words how daft this is. So get shouting at your MPs, get shouting at your union representatives, make a lot of noise about this. This is going to get me in a lot of trouble. I'm definitely going to get an email from my work about being angry about this, but I'm sorry, this is something that is very important and that we need to be making, that needs to be a lot of noise, and government needs to kind of pull away from this utterly destructive route. I mean, people say, but the railways can be more efficient. The railways are always trying to be more efficient. What do you think people are doing? We're not just trying to just burn money. No one is trying to do that. The idea that this is basically going to come from potentially major staffing reductions it's just mind-blowing. Absolutely mind-blowing. Yes, agreed to all the people in the chat. I'm not going to repeat some of those statements, but yes, I agree with all of them. So, yeah, I'm pretty angry about that, as you might imagine. So if you want to talk about this, talk to your union representative, send me a message, I don't know, chat about it. If you've got anything else you want to share, this needs a stink needs to be kicked up against this, because it just boggles the mind, absolutely boggles the mind. So there's more news, so this is a blank slide because there's other news. There's news about the further death of devolution as government tries to strip more powers from Transport for the North. Somehow Heathrow expansion's made it back onto the menu. The ONS have released, the Office for National Statistics have re-released their home working data set, which is very interesting. So that's something else. I might squeeze these into next week's news if nothing comes up. The fact that the railway, because of the IT stuff, is almost like becoming like a heritage working situation with so many weird combinations of rolling stock is quite fun. And actually, the Network Rail Stations competition winner has been announced. I kind of wanted to talk about that, but I don't think there's enough time. So we'll do that next time. But there's more news, which we will cover next time. In the meantime, let's talk about buses. This is, once again, we're going to do a PDF flick about the bus report. It's already nearly 50:30. Good grief, I knew it would happen like this. I'm so sorry, everyone. We're going to talk about busing back better. So on the, considering we've got discussion in even the Queen's speech. Actually, I didn't put the Queen's speech stuff in about rail. There's stuff about, the Williams review is theoretically going to be released in the next couple of weeks. Goodness knows what that's going to talk about. The rehashed Williams-Shapps white paper. I don't know what they're actually calling it now. Crossrail as well. Crossrail is kind of getting on it. That's another... See, there's so much news. There's just too much news for me to have covered in a rail natter. Normally I can kind of broadly keep on top of it. Anyway, the government is kind of saying some things that are not crazy, and this was an example of it. This and the gear change report, which is about cycling infrastructure and active travel infrastructure more broadly. These are good documents, and I'm hopefully going to flick through this and say why I think this is a good document. There's a foreword by Boris the crate. We'll get to that page anyway. But anyway, I like this report, and we're going to talk about it. So, all that angry news-based stuff that I've been shouting about, let's pause that for a moment. More discussion in the Discord and perhaps next week. In the meantime, welcome to tonight's Rail Natter. So a bit weird on the audio because I had the audio coming through my speakers and not into my ears. But yeah, that's the Intercity 225 fading out, of course. That was a bit weird on the audio. Sorry, everyone. Anyway, yes, let's talk about buses. Buses. For the benefit of the audio-only people, that was a picture of a Class 141 Pacer. Buses. Here is a bus. A bus is, well, what is a bus? A bus is basically a metal cuboid upon which, rather than steel wheels, you sit it onto pneumatic tires like this. You can have 2 axles or 4 axles, or in some cases of some of the super fancy buses, you can have like 8 axles. They get pretty snazzy. And what you do is, rather than a railway, it drives around on the road, and it can go places the railway can't. And they're cheap to run. They are incredibly useful. They also are driverless, by which I mean you as a person don't have to drive it. There's a person here. They're kind of a complicated computer machine called a bus driver, and they sit here in this bit here, red outline on a red bus paint color. Anyway, as you can see here, that there isn't actually one, but normally there'd be a bus driver there, and it means that you don't have to drive this machine. It drives itself. It's very, very, very clever. These are good things. These, contrary to what... Oh, wait a minute. Let's get my miniaturized face up here. Hello, everyone. I'm in the corner. Hi. Oh, breathe. Also, maybe have some water. Yeah, there's a picture of a national bus in lovely Midland red. On its way to Cov as well. The 776 to Cov. In any case, buses generally are a good thing. Railways should not be competing with buses. As Andy Burnham said, that was another piece of news. Andy Burnham's excellent little transport snippet he did. I like that. I kind of wanted to... I did one of those in Denton, actually, a couple of years ago, didn't I? Got the MP noticed as well. Anyway, more of that, please, Burnham. Anyway, buses. As he said in that video, it's daft that the bus competes with the tram. Yes, it is daft. Buses, trams, and trains all do different things and achieve different things and are useful for different reasons. Buses are good for the fringes or filling in gaps in urban areas where you don't want to. Urban construction is expensive, so you kind of have a high density mass transit corridor or sort of medium capacity corridor with something like Metrolink, and then you feed into that with buses. This is a good idea. Buses are good, but let's go into the report, which will tell us why there are problems with buses. Let's do just that. I think the next picture is going to be my blank reminder to Alt-Tab slide. So, let's Alt-Tab to the Bus Back Better report. Here it is. There we are. Rick Townend, you're absolutely right. A bus is an important add-on to the rail network. This is, public transport. Public transport has to be part of a kind of... It's a bit jargony, but public transport has to be part of an ecosystem, right? It has to be part of it, all of these different systems, things like the e-scooter that I was riding on earlier to get into town. The micro-mobility plus buses plus trams plus trains, and to a certain extent, taxis do feed into that in certain areas where you need to provide additional service for disabled people or whatever it happens to be. They're part of that ecosystem of kind of non-private travel. And so this report came out, and I think there's no better way to introduce it than to kind of we'll skip over Bojo's introduction because it's Bojo. But anyway, there's a foreword from the Prime Minister where he kind of tries to backdate the canon where he made up this stupid thing about crates and making buses out of crates that he clearly made up on the spot. He kind of tries to make that canon by talking about it, kind of retconning it into reality. But then, to be fair, he kind of says things that actually are difficult to disagree with. Like buses are important, and anyway, let's so here we are. And then there's the introduction. Then there's like 5 chapters which talk about buses and opportunity, what the government's vision for buses is, how to do that in terms of services, and then also kind of with a more passenger focused. And then the last chapter is about the kind of the green bus revolution and kind of what they plan to do about making buses greener. There's some stuff in an appendix about the COVID recovery plan, and then just some finale bits and bobs. So here's here's Bojo's intro, which we are going to gloss over, but just notice in the first paragraph he kind of is him retconning the whole hobby making models of buses thing, which he clearly doesn't do. So yeah, I mean, he's lying again. But anyway, don't sue me. But come on. But to be fair, within this foreword, all credit to whoever's written this for him, / if he did write this himself. I mean, someone wrote this for him, let's face it. He is actually saying sensible stuff. Ignore the kind of the party political stuff. The actual idea that buses are actually really important, simple, cheap, flat fares, these contactless cards, these are actually sensible things. Weekly price capping across operators, rail and tram. Notice that they're talking about transport integration. Agree. Have to agree with this. I'm not disagreeing with it. Of course, the fact that government does lots of action that undermines all this stuff is kind of by the by, but broadly, let's just look at the strategy paper at the moment. Do send me your criticism in the chat, by the way. And I will freely admit I'm not a bus expert, so I'm kind of coming at this with my kind of transport system hat on and my kind of broad picture transport system hat on, but I might not get everything right, so just like Gary was last week, do correct me if you think I'm saying things wrong, or if there's an additional bit of interesting bus context you want to add. Hello to the 114 of you who are watching now, by the way. So, in fact, just before I do that, I'm just going to go in here and I'm going to click this and say... I'm just going to type, we are live and talking about buses. And I'm going to retweet that just to make sure that people know what is going on. Because it's true. We are now talking about buses. The news is finished. So let's close Twitter and continue with this. Truth is a defense to slander. Well, indeed. Yeah, exactly. The Boris making buses things, so it comes up on Google if you search for it instead of the red bus with the lies. Yeah, exactly. It's so you don't see the £350 million to the NHS claim, which obviously was nonsense amongst many other claims during that particular referendum. That particular advisory referendum. Anyway, buses are at the centre of the public transport network, making kind of over 4 billion journeys in England in 2019-2020, more than twice as many as the railways. Yeah, this is true. We've been looking at the numbers of kind of the recovery from COVID, and you can see that buses are generally about double in kind of. Actually, that's irrelevant because that's the absolute numbers, isn't it? If you go into modal share though, you'll see that bus modal share is substantially higher than rail modal share, about double, in lots of cases more than that, which is fine. You'd kind of expect that because the feeder for a lot of people, bus does the job of getting you from where your kind of residence to in urban areas, and also it's kind of it's an indicator of the fact that we have very poor urban rail transit outside of London in the UK. There are a few examples, they're the tram systems here and there, but by and large, buses are actually the kind of the default go-to urban transit system in the UK. And so there's lots of chat here about sort of bringing people to jobs, study local services, good for old people, young people, disabled people, isolated people, absolutely. They save huge amount, kind of millions of tons of carbon and kind of emissions, thousands of miles of traffic jams, absolutely. The double-decker bus is a symbol of Britain. I'm not so sure about Britain's symbols, but anyway. But this is what's interesting about this report is the good thing, which is admitting this is kind of the government trying to set itself apart from previous incarnations of itself. They admit that policy has been wrong in the past, and this basically covers every government for decades, where bus policy has just been got wrong. So for decades, buses have been largely ignored by policymakers. I have to say, absolutely true. They have just been ignored. They've been considered a local authority thing, hardly any attention put to it. And so it's, the thing which I like about this document is that it is government talking about buses and talking about the way they are going to make that change happen, which to my mind seems like a good thing. So here's some nice pictures there's lots of nice, gratuitous, good bus pictures throughout here as well. So they're kind of saying like London is a role model, but they're saying it's only a partial role model. There are things that the rest of the UK can use the London model, but also there are other things Yeah, so there are kind of other issues, and I think the graphics that are in this thing, there's a lot of text which will kind of flim flam through. Oh, it's York, hooray! There are a lot of graphics, but we'll sorry, not text, but we're going to just focus on the graphics because there are some useful graphics, particularly some of the graphs that we're going to come to shortly. Yeah, so this is talking about, what's good is that some of this documentation, they look at best practice. And actually, when I was reading this for the first time, I was kind of, it was just some reading to me. This is probably some Gilligan stuff. Yeah, you're right. There is some Gilligan transport advisory input. And Gilligan, I disagree with quite a lot that Gilligan has to say. But on bicycles and buses, he's probably reasonably on the mark. Yeah, so a lot of this will be Andrew Gilligan. Yeah, Boris is kind of transport guru. Anyway, they pick out lots of things. I got 2/3 of the way through this, or maybe halfway through this, and I was getting angry because they didn't talk about municipal bus organisations like Nottingham and Reading that are tremendous positive stories. But actually, they do talk about it later on. They do talk about it as a success story, and I was quite pleased to see that. Given the shade of this government, I was pleased to talk about the fact that they do see municipal ownership as a positive model for running buses. So, yeah, there's actually some good, not too partisan stuff in here that I think is positive. There's lots of detail, lots of sort of stuff to do with enhanced partnerships. So LTAs is local transport authorities. There's so much jargon in this thing. There's CBSSG. There's a lot of jargon in this report, and it is all explained, but I'll try and remember what the different jargon things refer to. The CBSSG is the kind of the current support, COVID-19 support grant, I think. It's being paid to cope for the fact that ridership is lower. The reference to subsidies is high is not great. Yeah, that's true. Oh yeah, the report, the link to the report is in the description. Thanks, Detour. Very, very good point. You can pick this report up and kind of follow along if you like, and kind of flip back and forth. There's another picture of a gratuitous bus picture, which is nice. Oh my goodness me. So yeah, there's a lot of text. We're going to get there, and this is kind of, I think this is the introduction of what they're kind of aiming for. So they're aiming for there's a kind of a broad green 10-point plan. Yeah. Bus reform. Yes. Okay. Let's get started. So the opportunity. This is kind of talking about. This is kind of laying out the issues. Here's some nice. I should have put this in double, shouldn't I? Anyway. Oh yeah. How did I do that? I can't remember. There is a way for me to do this. If I go like this and go to preferences and full screen. Oh no. How did I do this? There's a definite way. No, I can't. That doesn't matter. You can all follow. It's fine. We're doing fine. So here we are. So buses are the easiest, cheapest, and quickest way to improve transport. Building a railway road takes years. Yes, true. If not decades. Better bus service can be delivered in months. Experience shows that relatively small sums of money, by the standards of transport spending, can deliver significant benefits. I 100% agree with all of this. And a lot of people, it's interesting. A lot of people say with HS2, which I'm sure everyone on here knows I'm a big advocate of, if nothing else, because it shows a sliver of a glimpse of a plan and a bit of strategic thinking. A lot of people say, well, HS2 doesn't come online until after 2030, and we're not really, or kind of in terms of full, it's not operating in full until kind of even the late 2030s. How does that solve problems when we're burning the carbon now? Well, the issue is that's not the short-term solution, and buses are the short-term solution. Buses, we're not going to be able to expand rail's capacity to move people around in 1 or 2 years. So we need to be expanding public transport, and buses are the way to do that. And it might be the case, buses are also a bit of a gateway drug into, if you're getting people on public transport, building ridership along a particular corridor with a decent bus service, it might be that corridor then merits medium capacity systems or full-blown mass transit or more. So buses are a really good gateway drug to generally improving public transport, if they're not competing with other modes, that is. There's someone pleased and handing over a bus pass in Brighton and Hove. So yeah, they're kind of, it's an acknowledgement that buses are key to the kind of wider government priorities. Some of their, I don't like the whole levelling up agenda because it's just an election soundbite, but kind of it does fit with some of the kind of underlying metrics of that. Bus spending works and is high value for money, absolutely. By the current Green Book stupid DFT and HMT measurement business case rules, buses consistently come out, and to be honest, this is why it shows how much a load of rubbish business case modelling is as a cost benefit analysis is. Ultimately, the fact that buses always score high and yet nothing ever really happens about them shows how much of a useless political tool that process is. Rick Townend, you're absolutely right. HS2 will need integrated local rail and bus at the endpoints, precisely. And buses have to be a key part of that. And really, actually, buses are feeding into the rail feeders for HS2. It's kind of like they're public transport is a fractal, and buses are kind of halfway out towards the fringes of micromobility and just walking and cycling. So the kind of the challenge, the issue with buses is that it's massively in decline. So in 1986, buses were deregulated. So the idea was that buses would be primarily a commercial affair. But basically, it was just a complete shambles because you ended up with profitable routes getting flooded with a stupid number of different bus companies and buses at the expense of other routes. Kind of timetables were chaos. Services were unstable, confusing. Quality of vehicles fell. It's interesting that some of this, the flooding of routes with trains, it didn't happen, but actually some of the stuff about rolling stock being poor quality as a result of privatisation actually holds true. In any case, kind of the idea that this sort of services which could not be run commercially, previously cross-subsidised from the profits of busier routes, now had to be supported by the taxpayer. If only they thought about how this works in relation to rail. Anyway, money available for... I mean, to be fair, they do cross-subsidise. That does happen. Money available for this fell substantially over the last 10 years, causing severe cuts to supported services. They don't mention the fact that some of the government's local authority cuts resulted in further bus cuts. They don't mention that, but anyway. They had the worst successes of bus wars, which saw streets choked with rival vehicles, blah, 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 legacy. Yeah. Basically, deregulation was a complete shit show. So here's some nice graphics. So key thing, and I'm a big fan of this because I generally like cooperation. I'm a happy socialist. But also beyond that, I'm just a person who likes it when people get along. And I think that problems are best solved when people get along. And it's true kind of when commercial barriers are kind of dropped, you'll find transport works better. This has been true on the railway in recent years, where kind of the commercial boundaries between train operating companies have been softened, where the boundaries between the collaboration rather than competition between network rail and the train operators has resulted in better service for passengers. This is true here. Here's an example. In an unnamed busy seaside resort, there are two sizable rival bus networks that don't acknowledge each other's existence. They publish separate maps. It means that they're competing for the same visitors, which results in parts of the city being totally underserved. They use the same route numbers for entirely different routes. Over capacity, too many operators running at certain times of the day. There is a multi-operator ticket, but it's much more expensive and it's hard to work out how to use. Yeah, these are just examples of where multiple bus companies operating in the same area is just stupid. The idea of bus companies not acknowledging each other's existence to me is doolally. I say this as someone in our corner of York. Bus services finish at like 7 p.m. That means that there is not a functional bus service for people who've got drunk quite reasonably, as is quite nice to do, and then are trying to get safely back home without walking for an hour. A bus would be quite nice, and there isn't one because the bus stops after a certain time. This happens in cities, let alone in rural areas. I grew up in Inverurie, where actually our bus service was pretty damn good into Aberdeen, fair play. But when I then moved to Mid Wales, the bus service was dismal. If I wanted to get into town in a night, I could get into town with there was maybe one useful getting into town bus. If I missed that one, which was common because it was unreliable, finding my way then into Aberystwyth from Talabont was just a mare. I'd often hitchhike my way in, which is not ideal. And then getting back was just not a thing. If I wanted to travel back, I think there was the 10 past 10 that kind of went the weird way around. I think that bus is actually now stopped. I'd catch that bus if I was coming home like an old granny coming home early in the evening. No offense to old grannies. Actually, I think old grannies party harder than that. The reality, if I was wanting to come home at regular, normal pub times, I was walking. Back up the A487 back to Talbot. That's useless. So that's rubbish. And that's just for leisure. Think about people who work late or work sort of outside of 9 to 5 jobs. Total discrimination against people who work sort of shift patterns. Just useless. Complex ticketing. So this is kind of many different weekly and monthly tickets, confusing, just all that complicated complexity is just useless. Ultimately, a slightly fractionally more expensive fare is worth it if you're adding to simplicity, frankly. And then poor integration. So the idea of this is good. In one home county's town with generally excellent bus services, misguided landscaping and redevelopment around the railway station moved bus stops further away. Really pleased to see that this sort of statement coming from government. Absolutely, this sort of thing is stupid. Planning can be really, really good at just having zero thought about the way that buses and trains interact. The fact that so many cities in England and Wales and Scotland. So many UK or kind of GB. I can't talk for Northern Ireland, but I imagine it's not dissimilar. So many UK bus stations, sort of urban bus stations, are not next to the railway station, are like miles from the railway station, or just don't acknowledge the two things exist. This is also bonkers. If anyone's asking me a question, by the way, you want to spot, recommendation to at me in, just as Castardo has. Castardo says, as a Dutchman, I can tell you it's perfectly possible to have a lot of different public transport companies and still have single unified payment system. Yeah, it's possible. I mean, that's kind of what Oyster is in London. There are lots of different companies running those services, but they're all under kind of, mostly, I wish the bicycles were, all under one kind of ticketing system, which is good. Tom Sedgman used to take the bus to work outside Treddle, and it was never on time in either direction. Yeah, can confirm. And invariably you'd miss it, but you'd never know whether you'd missed it and needed to give up and hitch. And so you'd end up waiting for 45 minutes, by which point you were stuck and late. Never good. The idea you have to get out at the bus stop 2 hours before you want to get into Aber was just frustrating. Yeah, absolutely. So here's the graph, which I think is fantastic, which explains a lot of these decisions quite dramatically. There are two dashed vertical lines here. One of them in 1986, and the other one in kind of, when is it, 99, is it? The GLA Act? So the first dashed line is when bus deregulation happened. The second dashed line is when the Greater London Authority Act happened, which is when London started getting more control over its own transport, which was, frankly, folks, a very good thing, and it should have happened across not just London but all of the major municipalities in the UK. So, look at that! Bus deregulation happened, and yes, there's an element of correlation, not causation here, but frankly, it is deregulation was a massive contributor to this. There's a big bold line here, which is bus services outside of London, and that the number just dropped. It just, as soon as deregulation happens, it just dropped away, very dramatically dropped away, with a little bit of stability here and there, but mostly just rockets downwards. And then as soon as local authority budgets started getting cut, the amount decelerated. You can see in recent years London's not done so well either. That's partly the rise of Uber and others that need to be regulated out of existence, but also the proliferation of Uber, but also the freezing of fuel duty has had an impact. Freezing of fuel duty has had a massive impact. You can see the increasing rate of so there's another line which is just a rapid upwards line, which is private car usage in Great Britain, and it's just rapidly rocketing upwards. Interestingly, inside London, bus use was pretty was kind of so you can see the comparison. And bus use, when the GLA Act was enacted, bus use started climbing much more rapidly within the Greater London Authority. So generally, consideration that the kind of regional control, devolved control of transport is a good thing. Oh, funny that. I wish government would learn that about other things. Anyway. So also other issues about urban transit is that bus companies sold off their inner city bus station, kind of bus service depots, which meant that now that buses are becoming more popular again, they can't actually serve that need because they can't get buses onto routes quickly enough to be reactive to peak and off peak. All very rubbish. So lots of problems. Obviously, COVID. They're acknowledging COVID is causing an impact as well, but again, that's kind of transient, and I wish they wouldn't focus on that because, frankly, public transport needs to be driving modal shift again. So here's another graphic here. You'll recognise this because it was the graph broadly that we put up earlier, and you can see it's the wibble wobble of bus usage. Only running up to September last year, I'll point out. But anyway, there we go. Apologies if you can hear my belly rumbling. Yes, it is happening. So you know what's going on there. I don't need to. We talked about that at the start of the episode. It's already 10 to 8. Crikey, I knew it would happen. So here's some pictures. So then what's good is they talk about the opportunity and they talk about some good examples. So here's Brighton and Hove. They talk about partnership working between the council and the local operators. And funnily enough, that means that collaboration means that Brighton and Hove has the highest bus use per head in England outside of London. So that's a great success story. There we go. There's one. There's another one, Harrogate Bus Company. This is, again, collaboration, high frequency timetable. And there's actually a lot of these around. Are they all trans devs? Is this a trans dev? Anyone? Any bus people on here who can shout at me? If not, There are some, it's a funny one, isn't it? Because in North Yorkshire, there's some really good examples of excellent bus services. The Coastliner is like a fantastic example of, and actually the buses around York, at, like, charging points. The Selby bus, the Selby bus is from York to Selby is so much better than the train alternative for all sorts of reasons. Not least that the direct connection is missing, but the bus is so good. Charging points, Wi-Fi, they're comfortable. It's frequent. It's just fantastic. Okay, it gets stuck in traffic on the A9T, but that's kind of that's not the bus's fault necessarily. And I think it's similar for the Harrogate Bus Company. It's a similar story. I think they've got really high quality buses. You get in, it's like, this is modern, nice, comfortable, partly electrified, if not fully electric. They're just great buses. Metro Bus. This is kind of a partial, like a kind of a. I don't know why they call it Metro, but you know what I'm like. I don't like Metro being used where it isn't Metro, because it gives people an excuse to not do actual Metro. But basically, it's kind of it's a dedicated bus corridor. It's improved buses, segregated busways to generally improve physical infrastructure that makes buses work. The acknowledgement here is that actually dedicated segregated infrastructure for buses improves reliability, improves journey times, and improves ridership. You just increase the numbers. They're all Transdev. I have to say, generally, it's not always the case, but Transdev are just generally, all credit to them, awesome. When there might be examples that buck the trend of that, but my experience is that Transdev is a pretty reliably good bus operator, where they're able to do that to have that collaboration with the local authority. I see success stories all over the place that I then look and it's like, oh, it's Transdev again. So there you are, Transdev. I'll checks in the post, please, or I don't know, free bus travel for a week or something. I don't know. So do it anyway. I'm joking, everyone. It's a joke. Projects which have gone patronage, so yeah, that was gibberishy, wasn't it? West Midlands, they're doing some good kind of subsidy by local government, kind of arresting general decline, kind of broadly bringing the bus branding in to kind of show, make the branding part of the regional authority, so you have single unified branding. I really like the West Midlands travel. I talked about this in what structure should the railways have, however many episodes ago that was. The integrating transit under the kind of the sort of Transport for the West Midlands, having its own, a bit like TfL, Transport for London, a bit like Transport for Edinburgh as well. They've kind of got their bus and tram branding. The idea of having unified regional authority branding for transport is a really good thing, and in urban areas particularly, and then combine that at the fringes then with the broader so kind of the broader picture with kind of the wider Midlands region. That integration is a good thing. So basically, they're kind of saying they want. So the report then says, "Oh, we want to roll these models of success out. We want more of this." And then they're going to say that these are the things that they're going to. These are the claims that let's hold the government to account on these. So supporting new and increased services. 300 million of funding to support the sector recovery from the pandemic. It doesn't sound that much to me. Giving local transport authorities skills and people they need to deliver the strategy, with 25 million of the 300 million allocated in 21-22, so that's for training and stuff, which to me as a skills focused person as well, that sounds like a good idea. I want to see how that manifests itself. I also want to see to what extent it's replicating stuff that's had to be stripped out by the fact that central government has defunded local authorities. So there's a bit of a giving, taking away with one hand and then giving with the other, and suggesting that it's because of government. So that the cynic in me says, well, that just means that government can claim it as an electoral, it can claim it during the election cycle and say, look, we did this. Whereas, like, actually, you just denied the local authority to do that, which might well have been a different colour of rosette, just so that you could then do it via Westminster. All right, Thatcher, chill out. And Blair, in fairness, as well. They're both as bad as each other when it came to Westminster centralisation. Bus priority schemes to speed up journeys, talking more about the government being in favour of these. That's a good thing. If there is a kind of a general interest in government of these things happening, it smooths the wheels of bureaucracy, and these things can move quicker. The fact that HS2 is like a mixed amount of love for it in the current government advisors and others. It's no coincidence that HS2 is kind of slowing down and having issues with programme if there's not that energy and that kind of momentum behind it in government. These are frustrating things that happen with if government's basically not interested, things will slow down because government has to be involved in their legal processes, all these things. If there's an interest from government, things will speed up. So it's good that there is this acknowledgement that government needs to do these things, because it means there's more likelihood that they'll happen more rapidly. Looking at Ditora's comments, there's lots of bus prioritisation still not happening in Bristol. I'm going to drink because my voice is about to disintegrate. Yeah, I'm always skeptical of the bus rapid transit name, because I don't think such a thing exists. It's just better buses. But I acknowledge that segregated and improved buses with kind of better branding and more obvious infrastructure on the ground for people is part of the... in fact, Dr. Kevin Tennant, who's joining us next week, as I will tease later, we might touch on this actually briefly, because it's interesting to hear what he has to say. He kind of talks about this. He's written about this, the idea of infrastructure permanence being a contributing factor to ridership. It maybe be interesting to explore that. Anyway, that's for the future. They're accelerating the delivery of zero-emission buses. They're throwing in a little bit of 120 million. Just to me, that seems like nothing. What is that? Probably 60 buses. Not that many. And the bulk of the 3 billion transformation funding will be paid after the transformational changes begin in 2022. Okay. Whatevs. The buses we want. So this is a discussion about buses. These are about specific buses. We want to increase patronage and raise buses, mode share, blah, blah, blah. Here's some nice pictures of nice buses. So more frequent buses, yep. Faster, more reliable buses, yep. Cheaper buses, okay, yeah, fine. Daily price capping, that sort of thing, yeah, fine. More comprehensive buses. So yeah, over provision on the busy routes. This is the letting Uber and commercialization do public transport, is that you end up with too much public transport where people ride it and not enough where people need it. So you end up with over-provision so that's just a common theme of the commercialization of public transport more generally. And so, it's an acknowledgement of that, which is nice. And also, the key thing here is this is really important, is easier to understand buses. So, and again, this is about integration. All public transport across England, they're saying England there because they only really have control of it because everything else is devolved, right? But they're saying all public transport across England, bus, light rail, and conventional rail should be easy to access via journey planning websites and apps. Absolutely, including times, accessibility information, fares, live running. Data is already available. We want to see it used additionally. They want more accurate information at bus stops, so kind of rolling out some of those when's the next bus appearing stuff to have happen at all bus stops. Absolutely. Common numbering systems for local areas, so kind of local branding. So this is a thing that you'll have seen governments gently been pushing already. DfT had already been pushing it to happen on the railways. You know, when the new rail names of the franchise holders, however many years ago, got announced, and you saw the dropping away of company names and names like LNER, GWR, London North Western, etc. These names kind of harking back to the olden days. Ugh. But also basically to get rid of company names so that and it's kind of buying into that kind of same logic, is that the service should have continuous names so people kind of know what they're getting, which I agree with. I do agree with that. It's just talking about public transport being perceived as a service no matter what's happening under the hood, which, fine. Heavy promotion marketing, timetable changes should be minimised and coordinated. All these sort of sensible-ish sounding things that are true on the railway, by the way, as they are for buses. Plenty for us to pay attention to and learn from. There's more. What else have we got here? Easier to use. So, common tickets, passes, daily capping, better to ride in, comfortable, high-spec, modern buses. I presume, where's accessibility? Yeah, we've got accessibility in a minute. Integrate with other modes, yes. Railway stations should be hubs for connecting services. Absolutely. This often doesn't happen. You often have bus stops that are, a 10-15 minute walk away from the railway station or worse. Our ambition is for an integrated ticketing approach to allow you to buy a through journey for local bus, rail and metro with a single tap on your smartphone. Big talk. Agree with that. Let's see it happen, though. They can't say that on the one hand and then literally cancel Transport for the North's ticketing work and plan for integrated ticketing on the other hand. So again, it's saying one thing, cancelling it on the other because they kind of want to announce it themselves. This is where the pork barrel element comes in, which is really frustrating. More park and ride they asked for. Greener, they just put more zero emissions buses for that. Accessible and inclusive by design. Disabled people must be able to use bus services as easily as other passengers. Absolutely, this is critical. Making buses more accessible. Not just the vehicles themselves, but also bus stops, stations, providing excellent customer service. Yeah, that's another thing. It's not just the physical infrastructure. Some of the kind of the soft infrastructure, the virtual infrastructure, if you like, needs to be more accessible. It needs to be made accessible and inclusive. It needs to be both those things. See, if the Tories can write inclusivity, all the TERFs out there should be able to get it too. Anyway, right. Innovative. We want to harness the entrepreneurial skills of the best operators. Yeah, whatever. I don't really. That's just garble speak to satisfy nobody. Seen as a safe mode of transport. Sector must strive for the highest safety. This is a thing. Secure. How safe and secure people feel on buses is important. Actually, if there's a dissuading factor, it needs to be resolved. So things like CCTV are shown to help with that. We want bus services that mean fewer journeys are needed by private car. That's a bold statement and a good one. I like seeing that. Government, I'm glad you've said that. This is good. Now, please do a broader policy aims that actually make that happen, i.e. fuel duty. Unfreeze the damn number. Right, okay, anyway. Good stuff. Our changes therefore need to tackle negative perceptions by non-users. We will have failed if we do not address the perceptions which deter people from buses. And here's passenger satisfaction and sort of some of the key sound bites about personal safety, children, evenings, weekends, don't understand where local routes go, fares, worried I may get stuck somewhere. This is all good stuff. Yeah. I think there is discussion about free Wi-Fi, David Shepherd. Yeah, I think that is mentioned somewhere in here. I think there's an acknowledgement of that as being part of a feature. So, yeah, these are the key things. Buses, and this is, yeah, I'm pleased to see they Transport Focus's annual bus passenger survey. You know, the National Rail Passenger Survey is a key source of information for what passengers want for railways. Likewise for buses, their annual bus passenger survey does the same thing. Invaluable resource for just understanding the frame of reference for which people want to use our modes of transport that we provide as public transport providers. So, yeah, some good stuff there. I like that chapter. There's lots of good things to learn from. But it's lots of talk, not much action. Let's see what happens next. It's 1 minute past 8. Hello to everyone who's been here for an hour and is upset that we've not talked enough about buses yet. Any insights, by the way, do shout at me. Yeah, Chris Bird, bus stop indicators often give a list of scheduled departures but not real-time. Yeah, basically, those things are worse than useless if they're not real-time. They need to be real-time. They need to be proper real-time trackers. Using the same information that you know Google is using when... Google is fantastic. Like Google Maps, okay, there are some issues by the fact that it bumps things like Uber and it can do, you know, and Google can be selective of what it prioritizes, but broadly Google Maps is a really yeah, Ella says free Wi-Fi shouldn't need to exist. Yeah, because 4G should be free for everyone. Yeah, well, that's another discussion. But anyway, yeah, oh, I lost my train of thought. It happens, doesn't it? What was I waffling on about? Oh yeah, Google Maps. In most cases, I can now go onto Google Maps, pick any location in Britain, and click public transport, and say get me there from here, and it will tell me the rail, bus, and indeed other mode connections. Generally, pretty much all of them are now in that. Pretty much all of those buses are in that system now, allowing me to get from A to B. It's fantastic. It's brilliant. And it just needs to be rolled out. But those systems are the systems that these clever bus customer information systems use. They use the same thing. Googly Maps, thanks Ella. Yes, so that's good. That's a good thing. Detour is saying that GPS tracking of buses should be a thing, and it's done in Dublin. It should be done everywhere. Yeah, those sorts of things are easy. They're easy to do. Right, strong bus networks connect our communities, getting people to jobs and services, opportunities, economic growth, inclusion. Yeah, all good stuff. Yes, to all of this. So it's kind of going back to describing the bus sector today, and we don't need to kind of go over that again. And the Building Back Better. By the way, wasn't Building Back Better a Labour slogan? Like, wasn't that like a Corbyn slogan that the current government has nicked and made their own? Just checking. Anyway, so this is a term which we're going to see quite a lot mentioned in the report, which is the enhanced partnership. Basically, I think the enhanced partnership is just local authority and bus companies talking to each other, and actually, you know, the local authority having more. The bus company goes, yeah, actually, let's do more local authority. We'll accept an element of control from the local authority if the local authority spends some cash to help our buses run better. And it's almost a bit of a kind of I don't know if it's an informal or formal agreement on that front. I presume it's formal because, you know, Britain and litigiousness. But I think it's kind of that's the basis for it. Oh, it's Biden. Was it Biden originally? Anyway, yeah. I don't know. Was it actually Biden originally? I'm not so sure. Yeah, we're currently building back exactly the same. I think we're building back worse at this point. Anarcho Joe. Was it actually Biden who came up with that one? Get on the Google search results to find that out, folks. So this discussion of enhanced partnerships, and this seems to be the favoured sort of transition model, if not the final model, but this favoured transition model by the Bus Back Better report. I'm going to have to drink another drink of water. Sorry, everyone, my throat's going. I was positive I'm sure I saw it as a Labour thing first. Not that I particularly care about the Labour Party claiming a slogan, but it's just another thing that's been, if it is the case, it's yet another policy that's been nicked by the incumbents. Right. The key thing is that the legislation is changing, that things need to happen. And this is kind of interesting to focus. It's not interesting. This is important to focus on. So by the end of June this year, local transport authorities will need to commit to establishing enhanced partnerships as a minimum under the Bus Services Act, or begin the statutory process of franchising services. So franchising is the next step, where local authorities have total control, and they just franchise out the operate. They concede. It's almost a concession model, really. It's kind of not. It's similar when it comes to buses. It's broadly the same thing. People are going to correct me on that. So operators in those areas should cooperate with those processes. So basically, it's saying the law is going to mean that local transport authorities need to have committed to either establishing an enhanced partnership or beginning the legal process to do service franchising. The ones who don't, the ones who don't have access to franchising powers at present, but consider that it's the best route, should progress with the implementation of an enhanced partnership alongside applying to the Secretary of State. So they should start the enhanced partnership as well as continue to. So basically, the government is, I suppose, usefully saying, look, if you start an enhanced partnership, it won't prejudice your process towards bus franchising, which seems to me fair enough. I'm sure people will point out some of the issues with that. By the end of October this year, local transport authorities will need to publish a local bus service improvement plan, a BUSIP. They've not actually written the thing there, to be fair. Each plan will need to be updated annually and reflected in the local transport authority. So much jargon. The LC WIP. It's got to be related to the LC WIP, which is the cycling and walking infrastructure plans, the active travel plan. I don't know why they didn't call them like ATAPs, active travel plan. I suppose active travel is jargon, but then they turn it into jargon anyway, so it undermines the fact that it was trying not to be jargon. Whatever. LC WIPs is a thing that I hear a lot of when I'm on this stuff. Sorry to the York Cycle Campaign. I've been a useless committee member this year with COVID and everything, but I'll be better when things are back to normal a bit, I promise. Anyway, yeah, but the York Cycle Campaign, we come across LC, we're kind of dealing with the LC whip and York's one or lack of sensible one and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so it needs to be basically by October 21, the LTA needs to have established that improvement plan and say what they're going to do. And from April 2022, they have to have this stuff in place, otherwise they start losing cash. That's basically the thing. They'll stop getting the support that they otherwise would do if they haven't started doing these things. There's a bit of a discussion about franchising working well for railways and not for. It's a little bit different. Franchising for buses, and correct me if I'm wrong, this franchising for buses is kind of more like the equivalent of concessions on the railway. Anyone wanting to correct me on that? But as I see it, that kind of like bus franchising is a bit more like the equivalent of doing rail operators as a concession model in the way that it functions. Anyone kind of that sort of it ends up being a bit like that because of the way that control and infrastructure, the way the physical infrastructure works. The railway has its own dedicated physical infrastructure, whereas buses don't, and so there's a slight difference in sort of. I'm waiting for the chat to go. Yeah, that basically works. No one's disagreeing with me yet, so I'm gonna stick with that. Bus franchising is kind of the same as rail concession holding. So there's the difference is about the profit making. Ultimately, the bus franchising means that they can stand to make a profit when things go well, whereas a concession they just get a fixed amount of cash. But actually, the kind of thanks David Bumstead and thanks Rick Townend for your questions and queries. And David Bumstead, your question was a good one, but Rick Townend answered it for you. Nice one. Love the YouTube chat, by the way. You lot are always helpful and great. So that's my kind of rubbish explanation of concession for rail is kind of the equivalent of franchising for bus, right? Sort of expect the same thing. So this is a bit of a description of what the bus service improvement plan needs to do, and they talk about the fact that so what it needs to do, what they expect it to kind of achieve, and then they say and what it needs to explain. So this is saying, look, you need it to do all this stuff, and I think they say there'll be cash provided to train local transport officers and those involved in this process to actually. The kind of the government is going to provide cash to train people on and provide kind of guidance on what this needs to look like, and will provide support to allow local authorities to create this stuff. I'm not going to go into the detail on this because you can look at it, it's a bit kind of fiddly, but the idea of this bus service improvement plan is the thing that will say we're going to use an enhanced partnership, or we're going to use an enhanced partnership while we try to get bus franchising as well. So here they're talking about bus franchising. I don't think there's much particularly. the Secretary of State will reserve the right to refuse an application for franchising if they, it should say they, for God's sake, believe that an LTA does not or will not have the capability and resources to deliver the franchise model chosen, or that an enhanced partnership would deliver the improvements proposed more quickly and cost effectively. I mean, I can understand, if it wasn't the Tories in charge, you can kind of understand that statement, but, it's a little bit of a get-out-of-jail-free card that the Secretary of State can essentially go, no, Burnham, you're not getting your franchising because we know that if you get franchising, it'll look really good for you. Anyway, but I can kind of understand a bit of, if there's an over-eager local transport authority or local authority that is clearly not going to, that franchising is not actually going to work, then there is some level of understanding that the Secretary of State would have a power of veto over that. It's kind of understandable, but there's a risk that it can be exploited. Rick Tanner, please don't cut the news section. Is one of the parts of. Are people suggesting I should cut the news section? I haven't seen that in the chat. No, I'm not going to cut the news section. It's part. Rail Nat is kind of a discussion, and it always overruns. And my logic is that people can come back and watch this bit, which maybe parts of this aren't as interactive as the news is, and blah blah blah. So sorry, I'm not cutting the news. I might skip it when I have guests because I don't want to take up the guests' time more than anything else. But I'm always going to have the news in Rail Natter. It's an important part of it. I think it's a chance for us to discuss, even though because we had so much, I didn't really do much discussion this time, did I? Sorry. Anyway. No, Rail Natter news is staying. So, sorry, this is happening in the YouTube chat for all the audio people, audio-only people who are like, why is he's changed the subject again? He's bounced around to another topic again. Sorry, if you've not got used to this by episode, 61 by now, then I can't help you. Right, so, although I love your patronage, please keep listening, blah, blah, blah. Right. This section is about funding and bus. This is the 25 million. So this is what I was talking about. They're going to establish England's first bus centre of excellence, enabling the delivery of a long-term program of. I like saying long-term program. That's nice. Of activities and support. Kind of sounds like a good idea to me. Centralised teaching resource that people can send their, transport officers for away days, and they kind of learn. That sounds like a good idea. Is it replacing resource and skills and training opportunities that have been gutted as a result of 50% chops to local authority funding? Maybe, but anyway, okay, fine. Sounds like a fairly sensible thing. Yeah, Ella, you're pointing out that when I was on your show, I was the one keeping you on topic. It's just a thing that happens when you're hosting, because you've got, like, about 20% of my brain is doing the what am I going to say next, and the other 80% is worrying about all the other stuff going on. It just happens, doesn't it? I'm not very good at it. I don't know how I've managed to do so many of these and how many of you support me. I love to you all. I don't know how, but why you do. It's poor quality content, but I do seem to like it, so I love you all for it. Like and subscribe, etc, etc. Devolution, here we are. In line with previous devolution of bus funding to Transport for London and Transport for Greater Manchester, we will work to devolve bus service operators grant, including once it has been reformed to combine. Is that MCAs? Those MCA, is that combined authorities? Municipal combined authorities, is that, or metropolitan combined authorities? Is that what that means? Help me there, thanks. And other LTAs who request it. Bob's Rail Relics, like the Transport Road Laboratory of old. Yeah, this bus centre of excellence, I think it is a bit like that, yeah. Right, anyway. We expect all local transit authorities to agree. Yeah, we've said this, the commitments. We've already discussed the commitments, right? Intensive services and investment on key corridors. What's this little bit? This is talking about... Oh, this is interesting. So this is a thing that, I advocate for on railways, which is that in densely populated areas, bus services should be so frequent that people don't need a timetable. And evening services on these roads should be at least every 15 minutes. Yeah, I like that. That's important. If you can make it so people don't care what about the timetable, that's when public transport really comes into its own. And that's a virtuous cycle of, like, more people rely on it, therefore it becomes more reliable, therefore more people are comfortable relying on it, therefore it becomes more reliable because, you can fund it better. It's a virtuous cycle. It's good stuff. Significant increases in bus priority. So this is a bit like gear change for cycling. This is a key, this is an absolute... Gareth Williams, MCA, Maritime and Coast Guard Agency. Thank you, Gareth Williams. Very helpful. There must be significant increases in bus priority. Yeah, I like this. This is important. It's basically saying more priority to buses, less priority to private vehicles. Yes, good. It's talking about traffic signal priority, bus gates, clear and consistent signage, all critical stuff. there's a lot of stuff underneath this. More comprehensive socially necessary services, super bus networks for intermediate areas, so kind of neither urbanized or rural, like fully urbanized or deeply rural. Sort of some of these sort of semi-fast buses, if you like, a bit like that. Key route, lots of good stuff for generally improving the consistency and reliability of bus services. And then it's a kind of an alleged promise from government to modernise the bus service operators grant, to move it away from being a well, the bus service operators grant is essentially a fuel-based subsidy. It's not right for the 21st century and the environmental challenges we face, so they're going to refocus it to being a kind of, they're kind of moving the main element from fuel consumption to distance rate, which would address the current problem where zero emissions vehicles don't get that bus service operators grant. Yeah, this is something that's going to have to work out to the broader transport picture with private vehicles eventually. But yeah, this is good. This is a good change. It makes sense, and it's always nice to see government saying the right things, which I think it is here. Other people might be able to pick me up on it, but mayoral combined authorities. James P, thank you so much. Mayoral combined authorities. So like, yeah. So Wyker is one, West Yorkshire, which Tracy Brabham just won. Congratulations, Tracy. Burnham, Rotherham, and now no longer Palmer. Hooray! Anyway, ending payments for dead mileage between depots, start finish of passenger service. Lots of sensible looking. Additional amount for rural bus services. Just that looks sensible to me. I have to say, fair play. That all looks sensible. We'll make sure that future local transport is joined up. So they're kind of so this is a promise from government, central government, saying, look, where we're in charge of a thing, we'll endeavour to ensure it's connected to the thing you're trying to do. Fair enough again, and this is where I did a little bit of fair play to this paper. I was getting to this point, page 49 by the way, and I was like, they haven't mentioned municipal authority, like municipally run bus companies. I'm angry about this, but then. There's the section on Reading Buses. Reading Buses is owned by Reading Borough Council and has been transporting passengers for over 100 years. It has one of the youngest and most environmentally friendly fleets in the UK, and in the autumn 2019 transport-focused bus passenger survey, they scored incredibly high passenger satisfaction, 92%, which is great. Bus usage has grown through consistent partnership working between the council and the bus company, resulting in Reading having the second highest bus use in England, away from after Brighton and Hove and outside of London, which is fantastic. Just absolutely incredible. 40% increase in ridership in the last pre-COVID in the last 6 years. Just a tremendous success story, and I was pleased to see them talking about this. So I don't know to what extent they say. This is an interesting line. So also they talk about gear change, the fact that buses will be bikes will be carried on more buses. For me, that's important. That's a good thing. So you kind of talk about gear change. They refer to gear change and integrating these two things. This paragraph is interesting. So we will review whether it remains right that local authorities cannot set up new bus companies. The Bus Services Act 2017 prevented further municipal, kind of local authority-owned bus companies being set up from scratch. While this is not an absolute barrier, as local authorities can already purchase an existing bus or coach company, we believe this part of the legislation is ripe for review. This is, again, fair play to them. They are saying, actually, maybe it is a good idea to have municipal bus companies. Yeah, they acknowledge that there are only a handful of municipal bus companies at present, but there are some strongly performing examples among them. They're basically saying, actually, statistically, a municipal bus company is likely to be a success story. That's a good thing, folks. Does this report, Matt Reed asked, does this report say anything about getting rid of the diesel engine bus? Yeah, they do. They do talk about that in kind of the kind of later chapter. This is stimulate. What's this about? What's this last thing? Law Commission to future-proofing regulated framework, more flexible services. Okay, bit of thing about license. Okay, this is some stuff that a bit of legalese. I'm not entirely. Oh, they're talking about automated vehicles. Boo! It doesn't need. You've got a driver, does it? Don't make the bus more expensive and complicated and it. Just pay a person, a skilled bus driver, to drive the bus. That's fine. It's fine to have a bus driver. People like having a bus driver. They feel safer. It's a community cohesion thing. Just have a driver. It's fine. We want to stimulate innovation and able to thrive. Blah 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 blah. So here there are some 9 principles for future transport. Right. New modes of transport and new mobility services must be safe and secure by design. Number 1. Number 2, benefits of innovation and mobility must be available to all parts of the UK and all segments of society. Yet, agreed. 3, walking, cycling, active travel must remain the best options for short urban journeys. Yep, true. 4, mass transit must remain fundamental to an efficient transport system. Good. That's kind of acknowledging that automated systems Well, okay, DLR is a mass transit system-ish, so that's automated. It can happen. So that the same mass transit must remain fundamental good. These principles are fairly sensible, by the way. New mobility services must lead to the transition to zero emissions. So it's saying don't just go to Uber and have pumping out the diesel fumes. Mobility innovation must help to reduce congestion through more efficient use of limited roads. Again, it's kind of acknowledging the uselessness of Uber and gig economy taxi systems. Marketplace for mobility must be open to stimulate innovation and give the best deal to consumers. Well, that's not really real because geography is by nature becomes a natural monopoly. But whatever, I kind of get what they're saying. New mobility services must be designed to operate as part of an integrated transport system. Yep, fine. And data must be shared. So it's an open data thing. Hooray! I kind of agree with those 9 principles. Those are kind of related to innovation, right? How many chapters? We're in chapter 3 of, 5? God. What time is it? 2020. I'm going to hammer through these more quickly. Sorry. COVID measures. I'm going to ignore the COVID stuff because it's not relevant, really. Delivering for passengers. We will set a high bar for standards enabling buses to be used by all. Okay. Here is much waffle. Lots of regulation-based stuff. Bus service registration process. Fares must be lower and simpler. Okay, so this is sort of some of the administrative side. Seamless integrated local ticketing. Here's bus. So this is another interesting thing, which is relative expenses of buses, rail, and road. The light blue here being motoring, and the price is just dropping off massively. Rail, interestingly, rail doing not great is quite a lot more substantially expensive than motoring. But then actually buses leapt upwards in like 2015. I presume that was from local authority funding cuts and therefore local authorities putting more onus on passengers to pay for services. That's a horrible leap there. I'd be interested to know exactly what caused that, but not great. Driving should be the most expensive of those, not the cheapest. It's not everyone can own a car, and therefore if you make car the default cheap thing, that means it's not cheap, it's expensive, and it means that buses and rail and mass and public transport is even less accessible. These are bad things, folks. Integrated service pattern supporting people into work. So this is kind of a job centre plus discount travel. That's good. They're kind of going through all the things that buses do now and how those might change. Again, I'm not going to concentrate on the details. Read through and Ella's shouting about getting ITSO more standardised in more places. Yes, please. For goodness sake, travel cards are a thing. And also just contactless more generally as well. Enable both. Contactless, just leaping to contactless can be exclusionary. So, ITSO standard and get your... If you want to know what that is, Google ITSO smart card and you'll get information about it. Services must be simpler and easier to understand. Yes, all this stuff. There's some more good examples of like Nottingham's Hucknall Connect. The idea of this is it's a bit of a kind of a dynamic system that enables them to get it. There's some interesting kind of examples. Networks must feel like a whole system which works together. We will promote buses aiming to demystify them and improve their image. I don't know what that means. That worries me slightly. Who are they going to pay to do some bus adverts? I don't know. I like this one. This is Tees Valley Tees Flex service, which is kind of like forget the autonomous bus nonsense about what you can have. No, flexible, and I know this is what people say autonomous buses can do, but you don't need it to be autonomous. This can do it now with a driver and a driver advisory system. There is a driver driving what is like a big minibus around, which is flexible. It was introduced, fair played, by the Tory Tees Valley Hushan, isn't it? Is that right? Have I pronounced that right? I hope I have. Sorry, Ben, if I haven't. Introduced in February 2020. It's kind of this fully accessible minibus, and it kind of is on demand and pre-bookable, which to me, on the fringes, where it's not necessarily sensible to have a constant high frequency service. This is not a bad way to provide connectivity in communities where it can kind of dash around, or you've got kind of a quite a sprawling kind of semi-urban, suburban, or kind of semi-rural type of environment. Really interesting. Worth looking up how that functions. I think it's a success story, and that's why they put it in, which is good. We'll give bus passengers more of a voice and say, so they're kind of, hopefully that will mean more transport focus kind of activity as well. More on-demand bus services. There's another one down at Go Coach in Sevenoaks, which seems like a reasonable... again, showing that you don't need driverless to have on-demand services. It's not radical revolution. It's merely just evolution of what buses can do now, but using a bit of that data that we've got access to, and also just like, I don't know, a phone / an app that says, actually, I quite fancy riding the bus at this point. So they talk about that more demand responsive sort of service. They talk about bus rapid transit. I know I don't really like BRT as a thing, but basically it just means more segregated infrastructure. They say they're going to support that. They're talking about Glider in Belfast, and also the Lee Salford Manchester busway. They talk about Cambridge guided busway. Excuse me. But no, to be fair to it, like, actually does have a purpose, does function. Yeah. Segregated busways are a thing. They work. They're good. Actually, they are good. If combined with, like, actually, I don't know if anywhere they talk about trolley buses in here. I bet they don't, because, government doesn't like electrification. But anyway. Oh, here's the Belfast glider. I have mixed feelings about this. It's a bussy, trammy thing. I presume it works fine, but no one should pretend that this is a good transition system. But ultimately, if you're seeing one of these, the chances are it should eventually become a proper tram, because if you've got super high frequencies, eventually it's going to merit having a tram, not a... But anyway, the point is it comes with, like, tram-style stops and all this stuff, and it's the permanence of infrastructure that Kevin Tennant has kind of gone on about. Yeah, sort of some of these... like some of these things that make it feel a bit like a tram and theoretically, but there, as I've talked about when I talked about the Cambridgeshire Autonomous Metro, there are reasons why why steel on steel is better than tar on tarmac. And this is the bit that Matt, you were asking about earlier, the green bus revolution. Yes, I'm going to whistle. It's York again. Hooray! These are lovely, by the way. The York Park and Ride buses are great. They're really, really nice. Like, in fact, a lot of the buses in and around York at the moment they are fantastic, really good. They just don't run frequently enough, and there are some big gaps. The UK has one of the most ambitious approaches in the world to achieving net zero by 2050. That's kind of half true. I think that's we're blowing our own trumpet a little bit there, frankly, because we given that we do some creative accounting to ignore some of our own emissions, and we also ignore the fact that that's because we've outsourced a lot of our emissions to China, because they make a lot of our stuff. That's kind of a bit disingenuous, frankly. But anyway, it's kind of a bit true. So they're talking about what buses can do to achieve that, and the fact that even a nasty fumey bus is a good thing. But actually, if you then decarbonise, you've got net zero bus services, considering all technologies fairly. So they're saying that we're not going to prioritise, fuel must be green, blah, 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 blah. We don't necessarily go for like battery, that we're open-minded, fair, fine. It's less of an issue on buses because it's easier to deploy it's easier to deploy sort of trials within the bus industry than it is within rail, I'd argue, because of the additional complexity of rail vehicles. I think with buses, a bus is easier to kind of muck around with different options, because there are hydrogen buses around, there are battery buses around. We have been playing with different alternative technologies for powering them. Fine, do that. Buses are a good place to muck around with that stuff. But basically, the point is they're going to provide... Oh, there we go. We're nearly there. The point they're saying is they are going to provide cash for people to deliver more electric buses. They are going to do that. So, fine. There's a little bit about, which is interesting, which raised my eyebrows, about the zero-emission bus regional areas, ZEBRA scheme. So it's kind of like a ultra-low emission zone, but kind of only looking at buses. That's kind of fine, and buses can account for quite a lot of pollution, but ultimately it needs to be combined with excluding polluting private vehicles as well, if not entirely excluding private vehicles, other than those with a blue badge. So, yeah, there we go. Some interesting stuff. And actually, I think from this point, that's kind of... What is it? 2027? Okay, it's another hour and a half. Some stuff about COVID. I'm going to just ignore the COVID stuff because I don't think it's super relevant. But that's the report. I just made that flash a lot. I need to stop doing that. I'm so sorry to anyone who has photosensitivity. Hopefully that wasn't too bad. It's a really bad habit. I really apologise. So, questions. Send your questions in. I'm going to do my normal ending bits. But, yeah, send them in. Oh, you're just seeing the flashing. I was 40 seconds behind. So, get rid of my face. That's it. Buses. I'm going to bring Big Face back before I close out to kind of do some closing remarks. But before I do that, thank you to all the people listening in audio only mode. This slide is silly, but it's colourful and it's a useful kind of bookend to remind me that. So for the people who listen in audio only mode, thank you. And audio only mode is available if you want to listen again when you're on a jog or on the way to the pub to meet friends, which can happen now. Hooray! So yeah, thanks to all the people who listen in audio only form. I hope it works. Again, give me feedback if it doesn't. And if there is general things that I could do better, like my darting around probably, then do let me know and I'll try. Patreon, Discord, PayPal. You know this slide, everyone who's a regular watcher. The Patreon. To all the Patreon supporters, thank you so much. You do enable this to happen. If you support me on Patreon, you get goodies like You do, and it hasn't happened for a while because I've been riding on lots of solo episodes recently because it's kind of felt like a bit of a backlog of reports to get through and stuff, and a lot of news, and a lot of people are really busy at the moment as well. But we do have some as I say, mate, Kevin's joining us next week, which is nice. But there are guests. What's really good is if you recommend guests to me that you want to come on to RailNat, to do that, Patreon folks. Not some. It's happened a few times. I will I will reach out to people, but do more of that because it really helps. If you recommend a guest, that's really useful. But also recommend the solo eps you want to see as well. And I am going to do a few weekends. I'm going to do some traveling around by rail and do some more of the green RailNatter episodes. If anyone remembers what those are. The Discord server is where these recommendations happen, particularly for Patreon people, but also general RailNatter chatter happens in the Discord server. So go on to that, and PayPal as well if you want to just kind of if you want to kind of treat me as sort of contingent workforce, then you can do it through PayPal. So that's patreon.com/GarethDennis, GarethDennis.co.uk/Discord, and paypal.me/GarethDennis. Those are the 3 links. Thank you very much indeed. I feel like a local radio host. Hello there. What even was that accent? I don't know. I was like thought in my head maybe do a Ken Dodd, and then I didn't do a Ken Dodd. I did like I don't know. That was embarrassing. Let's just pretend it didn't happen. Next week we are talking about pacers again. Hooray! Dr. Kevin Tennant might shout at me and tell me to change the title of this because he wants it to be more academic and less rude about pacers. But no. Episode 62 of RailNatter is going to be Pacers Were Bad and Saved Nothing. Yep. That's a title that is not only kind of incendiary, but it's also 100% accurate. Sorry, folks. So this is going to be an interesting subject. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be a bit like the old 158 episode, actually, because I think there's going to be a bit of a history of how I'm waving my arms around. You can't see me doing so because I'm missing my... you can't see my face. Anyway, this should be good. Kevin Tennant's joining us. Dr. Kevin Tennant. It's going to be good. Dr. Kevin Tennant is working on it's kind of, I think, towards the end of working on a paper where he talks about all the stuff he's uncovered in here. Lots of research that Dr. Kevin Tennant and Dr. David Turner have been doing together. I think Kevin had kind of been leading the project, and sort of David, they've basically been collabing on this, but Kevin's really kind of holding the reins on it, and Bob's Rail Relics, were they still running here? Yeah, that's a very good point. They are still running in a few places. I can only apologise. We're gonna talk about pacers, folks, and we're gonna talk about why they are. We're gonna talk about how they appeared because they were a bit of an accident, and in other senses they're an accident waiting to happen. We'll talk about where they came from. We'll talk about some of the numbers. So Kevin's got loads of interesting data that hopefully or kind of a fair amount of interesting data that we'll pick through. Anyway, that should be fun. It's 2032. I'm sorry this one's run on, everyone. Let's come back to my large face. Hello, everyone. Hello, my face is back. Oh, right. Some questions have come through, which is great. So I'm going to squiz up here. Thoughts? Michael C. asks... Bob's Rail Relics actually says, bookmark this date and come back in 2 years and let's see what actually happened. Yep, very good point. We have to hold government to... The good thing about reports like this, the good thing about a strategy... Okay, this isn't a mapped strategy, but this is a strategy. And everyone knows I like strategy. Strategies are a good thing. They're a very good thing. This is a strategy. The other good thing about a strategy, other than there being a direction for people to push in, is... My face is very pink. Is that it means that we can hold government to account against the strategy, which is part of the reason why they don't get created very often. This is good. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Bob's Rail Relics. Michael C. Thoughts on the report if they replaced all the bus with train? It seems like a very good report, and the mixed signals is very bizarre. Agreed. One of these needs to happen with rail, but there are some, I think to an extent, maybe the Williams-Shapps white paper is going to try and attempt to do some of that. We'll see. That's going to be coming out. So obviously when that drops, which should be the next couple of weeks, that'll be a RailNatter episode. And I might well drop the news on that one because goodness knows how much it'll take us to pick through it in detail. And I'll maybe do that live, raw, first time I'm seeing it on stream so that you all get my anger. Or maybe happiness. Could be joyous. It could be a joyous occasion. We'll find out. Tom Sedgman. How feasible do you think it would be to convert Bristol's guided busways to trams? There is an element of that. Edinburgh did it, for example. They converted the busway, the kind of the short stint of busway next to the railway near Edinburgh, or kind of the outskirts of Edinburgh, into the tramway. It is possible, yeah, because you've got a protected, segregated line of route. Generally, the tonnages are not dissimilar, so it doesn't. Often the busway might well be designed by the engineers with that in mind, so there might well be a level of additional redundancy to allow it to be upgraded to become light rail vehicle rather than bus. So yeah, generally quite feasible. It depends on what's in the middle that's the issue. It's the gaps that are in the middle. Goodbye to those who've dropped out. Tap is a lord. Bye. Paul Rogers. Night buses and regular buses in the countryside. Your thoughts, please. Both of the above need to happen. Night buses mean that the buses are available for shift workers, who are generally the people who we need who rely on buses anyway. Shift workers. It enables people coming back from maybe nights out, coming back from seeing friends, family. Night buses, good thing. Likewise, rural buses. Rural areas often don't merit as we talked about. I don't think that the bus is the right option. I don't think rail is the right option, certainly in the short to medium term, for serving parts of West Wales, between Carmarthen and Aberystwyth. I think that better integration of the existing bus service, and also they need to double up the service, because the express bus often ends up being a local bus service, and it stops everywhere if you just stick your hand out, which doesn't work. They need to be on that bus service. They should build larger, more obvious, formal bus stops that almost act a bit like railway stations, but have a bus service that only calls at those, and have that running through and then integrate. That would be a far better service. And then that would then integrate with local bus services. I'm a big fan of rural buses, and basically, so buses are the number one way of the number one rural transport before rail. They then need to tie into where rail does exist or might exist again in the future. Marley C, do you have any ideas for how to improve public transport in Cornwall? The current train line is rather slow and winding. God, that's an entire episode, Marley C. For the future, perhaps. What to do in Cornwall. We'll maybe get there. David Shepherd, night buses and services happen in all cities. Yeah, agreed. David Shepherd, should railway line route maps show feeder buses to help promote them? Kind of, yeah. But, railway maps are not that well used by the public anyway. I think physical maps just get overcrowded anyway. I think there's people like Gareth Pete. Oh, Gareth Pete, I need to get you on here for Rail Natter. I'll chat with you about. But in terms of passenger information and clarity, Gareth might talk about that a bit. Yes and no. I think that better in-app integration is a good thing. So if you've got basically, like, there should be a single public transport app for either nationally or at least at a local authority level, and again, integration with things like Google Maps as well. So what else have we got? What other queries have we got? Matt Reed, to reach the carbon target, are trolley buses a realistic option in this day and age? I think there are no trolley buses operating in the UK. Correct me, I think that's right. Yeah, I think it is. The last ones, were they in Bradford? Were the last ones with Bradford out? I was in Saltaire recently, and I was appalled to see how recently they had a functioning and excellent trolley bus system, now running into what is a kind of a very tasty looking beer house and factory. It used to be where the trams were maintained. I was like, those doors are big. It must have been a tram house, so it's a bit weird up here on the top of the hill in Saltaire. And then it's like, no, there's a nice little interpretation board saying, yeah, it what trams. Anyway, right. Ella developer, don't give me bus app ideas. I have too many projects. Well, yeah, I know, right? Right, that's plenty of questions because I've run this one on a long. Thanks everyone for joining on that one. My final thoughts before we move on, and I kind of reframe my head, is it's good. I think it's actually a good report. It's a good strategy, just like Gear Change. It's a good document. It's a document we can use to hold not just government but also local authorities and bus companies to account with. I am kind of vigorously all for it. Very much vigorously all for it. So it's a good report. As has been said in the chat, we need to hold government account using that document. But now they've created it, let's congratulate. There's a credit where credit's due. Good report. Let's make it happen. And if you're a bus person who wants to chat more about it, hit me up, because I would love to get a bus person on to talk about buses. Let's do it. Anyway, right. I will see you all in a week's time to talk about Pacers. It's going to be Pacer Natter. Anyway, right. Yes. Cheerio, everyone. Cheerio.